So when I first got down here in early May, I immediately heard from the workers at the source, the fishermen and their family immediately telling me about strange, common illnesses in an uncommon time, and they wondered if maybe they should be worried. It was headaches, dizziness, nausea, sore throats, burning eyes, and of course everybody's had this at one time or another, but it just seemed weird that all the guys were kind of experiencing these symptoms who were out working on the oil spill. And at that point in time it was continuous burn pretty much going on, and dispersant planes flying close enough, too close for the guys to be comfortable. And the guys were worried. And I explained that this is exactly what had happened in Exxon Valdez. Then they even got more worried because they wanted to know what had happened to the Exxon Valdez workers who got sick. And the story is that Exxon pretty much gave people hard hats instead of respirators, and then told them that they had the Valdez crud, cold or flu-like symptoms. If you want your job, keep working. If not, here we'll give you a pink slip if you're too sick to work. So everybody kind of said it was like a TB ward out there. Everybody's coughing, red eyes, everybody had it. Not that. Okay, we'll keep working. And the fishermen here kind of reacted the same way, in that they have been through 4 major hurricanes in 5 years, and they have no money left in the bank. So if fishing was going to be closed, if the job was oil spill response, then they felt like they had to do it. So, but they also knew they were getting sick, especially when I was telling them, well, actually then all these illnesses didn't get properly diagnosed, they didn't get properly treated, and people ended up very sick with chemical sensitivity. Some of them 100% disabled, legally disabled, some of them dead, and some of them managing to cope but having to adjust their lives to deal with their chemical sensitivities or their breathing problems or their long-term central nervous system.
And that's still in with, you're talking about Exxon?
Yeah, and then that's still all Exxon. So the workers, they said, well, what can we do? What can we do? So I was like, well, we need to get you respirators. And it's been like this, almost 3-month-long saga now of BP consistently saying the workers do not need respirators. If you wear respirators, your jobs will be terminated, and people who get sick have food poisoning or heat stroke, even though the symptoms are also consistent with chemical poisoning.
Was the same dispersant the Corexit used on the Exxon Valdez spill as is being used here?
We have some experience with Corexit 9527 from the Exxon Valdez spill. The use was more limited, and when we saw that it had a human health hazard in it, we tried to shut it down. Unfortunately, all we managed to do was the oil industry changed names of the product. They pretended it was a bioremediation compound to help the bacteria not eat the oil, and it had the same human health hazard in it as Corexit 9527. Still, we only had 103,000 gallons of this industrial solvent essentially put on our beaches, compared to over 2 million gallons of it sprayed every day.
Every day 2 million gallons?
Every day, totaling 2 million gallons. So there was fresh toxic dispersant being released every day on top of the oil. This is unprecedented. It's never been done in the world before at this rate over this long of a time. And what I'm not seeing is any, and so nobody knows. Nobody has absolutely any idea what will happen. The things we do know is that dispersed oil is more toxic than undispersed oil, and dispersed oil plus dispersant is more toxic than undispersed oil. We know that solvents, which are, these are industrial solvents, they totally wreak havoc on the central nervous system of vertebrates, so birds, mammals, fish. We know that the 2-butoxyethanol, it doesn't disappear right away. It stays, it solubilizes in oil and absorbs to biological tissue and then proceeds to wreak havoc. In people, it's a fetal toxin. It creates blood disorders, liver and kidney problems. It's an endocrine disruptor, reproductive problems. I mean, the list goes on and on. So this stuff was unleashed into the Gulf. And there were never any, I haven't seen the studies being done to track where this is, how long it's going to be around, is it being taken up by different species in the ecosystem. The material safety data sheet says, particularly for Crexit 9500, that it has the potential to bioaccumulate, means work its way up through the food web. I mean, we're over 2.5 months in, and the FDA still had no test for looking for 2-butoxyethanol in fish, in seafood that was supposed to be harvested and put on the market. So it's just this really an experiment of mammoth proportions that's been conducted in the Gulf without anybody's consent, except the federal government. So at what point do the people say, this is an assault on my body, this is an insult to my freedoms, and this has to be stopped? I mean, we never really reached that point before we emptied the world's warehouse of Corexit 9527, just for example. Nobody has any idea food, nobody has any idea about the air transport of this with the hurricane season now coming on us. So another thing I think we do know is that these dispersants are industrial solvents, and they make the oil worse. They basically break up the oil into little droplets and package the droplets in solvent. So you have these little bubbles of oil-wrapped solvent floating around. The impellers of boats offshore are getting chewed up, and engines are overheating. The impellers are hard rubber. This is what dispersants dissolve. They dissolve rubber, oil, and grease. The O-rings of dive gear onshore are getting chewed up.
Onshore.
Onshore, the O-rings of dive gear, where people bring their dive gear in to be repaired, the dive shops are saying, well, your O-rings were all shot. Put your gear in the closet. Don't put it in the Gulf for the summer. Again, soft rubber this time, getting chewed up. The people who have sent me photos, or I've seen in person, of rashes, and that to the point of blistering, when the blisters go below, through the dermis, through the subcutaneous, and leave scars. Oil alone does not do this. This is much more likely to be like the oil dispersant package. So the problem here is that this stuff is coming in, and there's virtually no monitoring for it in the air, in the water.
It would seem to beg the question, why is there not some serious documentation being gathered to try to collate that data and come to some kind of conclusion as to what are the exact impacts of having all of these different compounds throughout the environment along the Gulf Coast of the United States?
Well, what's happened is the federal government has mismanaged, I think, really, this this whole, I don't even like to call it a spill, but this whole catastrophe. We don't seem to have the real-time data 24/7 to show where is it at different times of the day. What's coming in. What I'm seeing instead are people across the Gulf who are sick, and 4 federal agencies who cannot manage to find any levels that are not safe. And I think part of the problem here is that the federal government has not been sampling at night, for starters. And also another, and this is because an air inversion sets up and pollutants get trapped near the surface. Concentration goes up at night. From what I've seen in the 21 years of working on Exxon Valdez and trying to bring justice for that situation, is that the federal government has backed off a lot in these 21 years, and is really letting the industry be much more aggressive and much more assertive. I thought it was bad in Exxon Valdez, but what I'm seeing now is that literally the oil company, BP, is just, the corporation is just able to bend these federal agencies to be literally like a shield against the public. And it's almost like this sovereign state of BP. So what I've seen that I didn't really expect, I mean, this sort of attitude, arrogant attitude by BP has helped this, is that the people down here are starting to ask the question, who rules? I mean, I thought it was we the people, not we the corporation. And I think this is the thread that all Americans need to get on, is that if this doesn't tell us that we have really lost control of our democracy, that democracy is an illusion, that democracy has been hijacked, and we need to work to get it back. Only the people are the last defenders of the democracy. If our government is not working as we the people agree to hold ourselves in compact under the Constitution, if it's not working, nobody's going to fix it except us. So for this attitude on the beach of, you know, if you touch that sea turtle carcass, we will have you arrested. No, that's not acceptable, but it's going to happen until we the people fix it. And it extends now to this attitude about our energy future. Until we the people have the power of the pen, we're going to see the fate of our energy legislation be identical to the health care reform bill. I mean, it's nothing that will really truly benefit we the people, and we don't have time for a long drawn-out battle over energy legislation. We just don't. If the climate scientists are to be believed, this is a now kind of a thing. So I think it's essential that we use this Gulf opportunity as a wake-up call, not just as an environmental disaster, but as a democracy crisis, and realize that, I mean, it's time for the adults in America to step up and wrestle back control of our government and our democracy from these corporations for the sake of the children and the future of the planet.